I'm Patrick Bateman.
You ever feel like this too? American Psycho, a brilliant satire and harrowing thriller, remains a monumental cornerstone of the Literally Me movie sphere. Taking place in New York City during the 1980s, the movie follows the life of Patrick Bateman, a 27-year-old slick, handsome Wall Street banker and part-time serial killer. Given Patrick's morally despicable behavior, it's strange to see how much we idolize him. From articles detailing how to adopt Patrick's morning routine, to fashion lines inspired by Patrick, it's obvious that society is fascinated by him. While it's concerning to think that we find a mass-murdering psychopath so relatable, don't worry, as we'll be uncovering just what exactly it is that leads people to think Patrick Bateman is literally me. Patrick is stuck in the corporate elitist circles of Wall Street. The lack of individuality is apparent amongst the members of this herd as they all look, talk, and act the same. Maintaining a prim and proper facade, they relieve the burden of this prop via low-life levels of hedonism, all in which they take part in together. Doing coke, partying with hookers, cheating on their wives, complete debauchery exists under the veil of their perfect images. Even when they look the other way at each other's deviant behavior, they seem to all look in the same direction. Patrick acts out of fear that he will lose his spot in this herd.
Because I want to fit in.
As such, he adopts the same vacuous lifestyle of his banker bros. This creates a warped relationship dynamic between Patrick and his friends as they in essence act as prison guards for his identity, confining him in the panopticon of conformity. To analyze this further, we look to postmodern philosopher Michel Foucault and his writings on the concept of the panopticon. The panopticon is a design for prisons developed in the 18th century by Jeremy Bentham. Bentham devised a prison where the inmates would in effect police themselves. The layout of the prison included a central guard tower and prison cells built in a circle around the tower. The guard in the central tower has 360-degree access to monitor all the individual prison cells. However, the prisoners will not be able to see inside the tower. Unable to determine if they are being monitored, the prisoners would have to make sure the inmate across from them is not acting out of order, as at any time they may be watched. Foucault saw this system as the perfect metaphor for society. Primarily interested in the repression of identity, Foucault noticed how individuals would often police each other to follow along arbitrary standards of behavior. He pointed out how we live with certain rules of speech and behavior, yet remain oblivious to how those rules were created or fail to question the rules. Rather, we only concern ourselves with forcing one another to follow the rules. In a sense, we don't see a central guard figure imposing these arbitrary rules and standards, we merely police each other to conform and comply with them. Patrick and his friends are caught in the panopticon of Wall Street in the 1980s. They all mold their looks and clothes to be mirror images of one another, much like how inmates are all given the same clothes to remain indistinguishable. In fact, numerous times throughout the film, Patrick is mistaken for someone else due to how homogenous the culture is. Likewise, the etiquette Patrick and his friends follow remains completely arbitrary. No one actually knows who decided how they should all speak, look, or act. There is no knowledge of a central guard tower creating and enforcing the rules. Rather, Patrick and his friends merely enforce these rules upon one another. Should someone fail to act in line, they are ostracized from the herd, thus bringing us to the predicament we see Patrick in. It's not hard to see how we relate to Patrick so much. The perils of conformity aren't foreign to us. We live in a world where from a young age, we are all forced to think, act, and speak a certain way as well. We greet one another with the same "how are you" question and "I'm good" answer, even if it's completely untrue. We mold our looks based on arbitrary standards of beauty. We even offer up the same phony prim and proper persona in the workplace, just like Patrick does. From all this, we bear the consequences of confining our true self-expression and identity. We, much like Patrick, are prisoners in the panopticon. One of the main consequences seen from this conformist culture is the two-faced nature of Patrick. He criticizes his friend for his anti-Semitic remarks, yet tells the bartender he wants to stab her and play around with her blood. He stands on the moral high ground as a white knight in the presence of others, yet secretly revels in the adultery he speaks out against. The person who withdraws thousands of dollars in cash and stabs homeless people says promote more social concern and less materialism in young people. This hypocrisy can be explained as the byproduct of the unresolved battle between Patrick's id and superego.
I simply am not there.
The concept of an identity is missing in Patrick as he has removed all sense of individuality to fit in and conform. As such, his ego, or sense of self, is skewed. A healthy ego, as Sigmund Freud points out, is a healthy balance of one's id, containing our deviant primal urges, and superego, our morality and behavior police. In this sense, Patrick's superego is the part of his mind urging him to conform and fit in amongst those around him. His id, which possesses his drive for deviance and individuality, is fully repressed and locked away in his mind. Freud points out, however, that we can never successfully repress our id as it will inevitably be let out in disguise, namely through dreams and neuroticism. As such, we see an explanation to Patrick's hypocrisy. His facade of morality can be explained as his overbearing superego at play, while his violent fantasies can be seen as the discharge of his repressed id. This presents a very relatable struggle we ourselves contend with. We lead a life on the principles of kindness and pacifism, yet get caught in random outbursts of road rage, relationship fights, and even momentary violence. It's as though there exists an inconsistent two-faced side within us all. As explained earlier, conformity functions along many of the same lines in our world as it does for Patrick. Many of us are embroiled with an overbearing superego, quelling our drive for deviant individuality to meet the pseudo-standards set by those around us. From Black Friday sales stampedes to mosh pits at concerts, however, it's not hard to see that often we let our repressed id off the leash, much like Patrick. While we don't engage in the same degree of violence and morally erroneous behavior as Patrick does, we do share a staunch similarity in our id's repression and need for release. Moreover, we see another blemish in Patrick's ego, through his rampant jealousy towards his coworker Paul Allen. In a society where everyone looks, speaks, and acts the same, seeing someone who is always one up above you, even in the slightest of manners, creates the ultimate feeling of inferiority. Seeing Paul Allen with a slightly better business card, restaurant connections, and apartment creates a wound in Patrick's ego as he must contend with the feeling that his sense of self is not as worthy as Paul Allen's. To quell this feeling, his id lashes out. The id, being the part of Patrick that yearns to stand out, counteracts these feelings of insecurity via acts of destruction and domination upon the world around him. This results in Patrick's nightly bloodlust and the killing of Paul Allen as the ultimate form of revenge. Patrick's sense of self is based on a comparative measure towards others rather than a healthy, self-focused approach. His id, already repressed, now boils to the surface and lashes out to protect his ego and reinforce his status as one up above. No one is free from the poison of jealousy. We, much like Patrick, feel the pressure to distinguish ourselves as better than others. Whether it be an ex, a rival competitor, or even a co-worker, we feel the need to be one up above them to ensure our ego's health. We feel the same gut-wrenching pain as Patrick does when we see someone achieve the dreams we have, get the girl or boy we desire, or have the house and cars we want. It's a natural human drive to yearn for individuality. However, in a world drowning in the swamps of conformity, that individuality for so many can only be achieved through superiority over others. As the movie progresses, Patrick slowly loses the ability to separate his nightly bloodlust from his regular days. He says he feels on the verge of frenzy and that his mask of sanity is about to slip. Patrick is beginning to feel the moral retribution for his actions, another indication of the imbalance between his id and superego. He's trapped in a vicious cycle where his repressed id continues to lash out more and more seriously, causing his superego, aka his morality police, to feel more guilty and resentful of himself. He knows his actions are immoral and repulsive, and he can only avoid that fact for so long before it consumes him. This harkens back to one of the most important books ever written, Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment. To summarize very quickly, the book details the life of Raskolnikov, an impoverished man who loots and kills a local pawnbroker to obtain money for law school. While he completely evades the police with the murder, Raskolnikov ultimately grows more guilty and resentful of himself to the point of near suicide until he finally admits to his crimes. He's sent away to jail for his murder, but finally achieves peace of mind after confessing. The arc of Raskolnikov calls into question the idea that one cannot escape their punishment. They may be able to hide from the law, but they cannot hide from the guilt they feel on the inside. We see this very phenomenon happen to Patrick. He grows more unstable from both his internal conflict and the ongoing investigation into Paul Allen's disappearance until he finally implodes at the end of the movie. He goes out on a particularly grotesque night of violence, running away from the police and killing anyone in sight until he finally resigns to his office and confesses his crimes to his lawyer. The weight of Patrick's guilt can no longer be withstood. At the pivotal climax of the movie, we see Patrick succumb to his existential pain and seek some semblance of relief through confessing for his wrongdoings. In answering the question of why Patrick Bateman is literally me, this may be the most important point of the movie, as it shows us why we have a soft spot for Patrick. We come to see that Patrick actually has a human side, one that feels the utmost remorse for his actions. While we agree that Patrick's crimes are absolutely egregious, the confession of Patrick shows us that maybe the mass-murdering psychopath we saw him as is not the real Patrick Bateman. Rather, we saw the actions of a man made mentally insane by the toxic and conformist panopticon he was a prisoner to. This isn't any different from the world we live in. Addicts often use to conceal their pain, bullies often mess with people to hide their insecurities or inflict their own pain on others. For many, their most abhorrent actions are often a byproduct of their own toxic circumstances rather than some inherent propensity for malevolence. Just like Patrick, the forces of guilt and shame do not evade us. People long for a relief from their internal remorse and feel a desperation to come clean from their mistakes. For Patrick, however, relief doesn't happen. The finale of the movie shows Patrick's friends and lawyer completely disregard his crime and act as if nothing happened in the first place. An important theme of Crime and Punishment is the notion that extraordinary people, aka the elites, are allowed to transgress the boundaries of society without punishment. Epstein. We see the same happen here. Patrick's refuge through coming clean and confessing means nothing as 1. His crimes don't matter to his elitist friends since they can get away with anything, and 2. People don't care for Patrick's internal dilemma. They only care about the superficial image and idea of Patrick. As such, they could care less about his behavior, however moral or immoral, so long as his material and surface level utility is preserved. Patrick now comes to understand this and realizes there's no catharsis available for his internal madness. No one cares. American Psycho offers us a humorous yet morose mirror to see our own lives. While from the surface the movie may just seem like a satirical horror movie, the social criticisms underlying Patrick Bateman's life dives deep into potent social issues that plague many of us. We see Patrick Bateman stuck in the same purgatory of conformity as us. We see Patrick deal with his own internal guilt and shame as we do. We see Patrick yearn for relief from the cycle of crime and punishment, only to get cheated out of it. From all this, it's not hard to see why we think Patrick Bateman is literally me.